add on to it from Mikey?
Okay. Before we go to the banks, please.
Sure. Just before you go to the banks next round, so I just wanted to make sure, because I think for the very first time, we have got a bit of a trust deficit from the way the data was presented, because with due respect to everybody, including yourself, I was quite very disappointed with the fact that then only 50,000 was shown, and there was nothing more granular than that. I would have expected Bank Negara to have a lot more granular data to actually convince all the leaders here, because we have got members we must go back to and explain and says what's happening on the ground, because otherwise it's very hard for us to explain. Second, even going by your own data, even if you take that 50,000 to be gospel truth, that 50,000 is a very homogeneous number, because you have taken out anybody who's more than 3 months in areas, so that group is out. The guys who don't even come to the bank are out, so it's a completely homogeneous group. That's a first among equal approach. 50,000 businesses in this country who have turned up in the banks to actually ask for this assistance is only less than 5% of the total businesses in the country. So how can only 5% be in distress? Even if you use the data by the government and saying that today we're losing $1 billion in the third MCO compared to $2.4 billion in the first MCO, that's a 40% chance. So 40% of our businesses must already be in distress. That's not reflected in your number. Second, even if you go by the Laksana's presentation, the last one, the 57th Laksana program, if you take the numbers of the 25,000 SMEs that are benefited and the 12,000 micros that are benefited, that's only 38,000 people. 38,000 people have turned up in the bank asking for assistance, about close to $12.5 billion. What happened to the rest of the 950,000 plus businesses that we have? That cannot be a reflection of what's happening on the ground. Look around, AG. Sir, that the number of businesses and individuals who are in distress is extremely very, very high. So I mean, on behalf of Mikey, at least, I would prefer if the banks are a lot more transparent, because AG, I can tell you one thing. I mean, Dato Amir just asked about it. To me, it's such an orchestra answer. Both the gentleman and the lady who spoke from the banks, I think she was from Maybank, I'm not sure where the gentleman was from. But it is a very orchestrated answer. It was sounding more like a politician. Kita prihatin, please turn up at the bank, we care for you. It's not reflective of what's happening on the ground. So you must review this position, AJ. And I think you have a moral obligation to make it happen for the Rakyat, because you cannot take this approach that first time there is absolutely no confidence in the banking system. I'm very disappointed in that way, sir.
Okay, thank you. Spoken from their heart, because I think all of them have been businessmen themselves, and they feel the plight of the businessmen and what is happening today. I heard the Contractors Association, he has voiced out things. But today what is actually happening is that the SMEs are really suffering. We all know that. We know some of them are doing well. And even if they're doing well, they go to the banks are doubting them. Even if they're not doing well, the banks are doubting them. We are between the devil and the deep blue sea. We can't move. And the banks must come up with some formulas to help all the SMEs. In time of crisis, the SMEs actually work very hard, because during the shutdown, lockdown, whatever it is, we are struggling. But at the end of the day, we have got the ambition to achieve the goal what we want. And that's why SMEs, you see that from SME, they grow to giant companies. Like my dear friend Dato Amir Ali, from a mining store, today is a hypermarket. And that is achievement. And that is what we want all SMEs to do in their life. So can we, instead of looking at things, come up with some solutions at this point? Moratorium is one thing which I think which will be necessary for SMEs as a breather. It is not as a permanent relief, it's just as a breather that they have to meet their OPEX, they don't have funds might be, so you can give them a breather to have this moratorium to start working toward things when they are happen. Many SMEs, when the banks don't finance them, they have their friends and relatives financing them. But today, even with your friends and relatives, in this pandemic, they have some assets. They can lend it to these SMEs. the banks are not willing to finance them on those assets because their businesses are not doing well. So how do we actually use this basket of assets which are available to these SMEs through friends, through relatives, to inject into the system to take their agenda forward? There must be liquidity. The banks must come up with a formula. If someone brings an asset to them at a market value, whatever the valuation is, can they give 60%, 70% without looking too much into the productivity of the business? Because the business is not there. They need the funds. So if Bank Negara can come up with a formula to start up a Dana Rakyat, where this sort of guarantees can be given to the bank to get these assets from people, from businessmen who need funds at this time to move forward. If not, what would happen is this will again go down to a different area, to along to money lenders and things like that. Many people will have problems in the future. To safeguard the interest, if a Dana Rakyat can take place, where businessmen have got assets, the bank, without asking them questions, can finance them against the assets during bad times and give them liquidity to move forward. I think it'll be a great idea. I think we must come up with formulas. We must have a think tank with the banks and the businesses to see how we can help the businesses move forward. Having said this, I think I respect the banks. I think David has spoken. Balan from CIMB has spoken. I've met many of these bankers. I think they are doing a wonderful job. But sometimes we feel that from the ground level, banks are not responding. But because if you get 1,000 calls a day, the bank cannot take everyone's call. And then people get tired of moving forward. I understand we all have to work together. But let's make it easier for the business then. If it is a moratorium, without question, if a person doesn't pay his installment for the first month, take him under moratorium and give him for the next 6 months. That means he has already told you that I cannot pay this amount. Don't ask him too many questions. Write him a letter, your installment has been not paid and you have been taken under this moratorium repayment. Let's find some formula which is going to ease the burden of the businessmen and the people at large. I think this will work out well rather than trying to think of things on how to do things. If someone doesn't pay an installment for 1 month, the bank knows he's unable to pay. Take him under the moratorium scheme because his installment is there. Tell him that you are under moratorium. Your moratorium period is 90 days. Please, after 90 days, you have to pay your repayment, or after 180 days, you have to repay your payment. I think let's work on an easier solution to solve problems. Thank you. That's what I have to say. Thank you, Adnan.
Thank you, Dato'.